I spent my life invisible, scrubbing the floors of giants. Then they dared to shine a spotlight on me, and in doing so, illuminated the darkness of their own world. The scent of industrial-grade lemon cleaner is my perfume. It clings to my clothes, my hair, my very skin. By day, I'm invisible. A ghost pushing a cart of rattling bottles and gray rags through the pristine, glass-walled corridors of Vance Industries. By night, I'm the one who erases the day, scrubbing away the coffee rings left by executives and polishing the fingerprints of power from brass door handles. This building, a monument of steel and ambition piercing the city skyline, is my world. But I only ever see it when it's empty and asleep. I knew who Julian Vance was, of course. Everyone did. He was the heir, the prince of this corporate kingdom. He'd glide through the halls with an entourage of sycophants, his designer suits looking more expensive than my car. His smile a flash of white that never quite reached his cold, calculating eyes. He never looked at me. To him, and everyone like him, I was just part of the background, as unnoticeable as a water cooler or a potted fern. That's why I thought it was a prank when he approached me 2 weeks ago. I was on my hands and knees, scrubbing a stubborn scuff mark from the marble floor in the main lobby. The building was quiet, the only sound the rhythmic squeak of my sponge. Suddenly, a pair of gleaming Italian leather shoes stopped right in front of my face. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. I slowly looked up, past the impeccably tailored trousers, to see Julian Vance himself, smirking down at me. His two usual shadows, Mark and Trevor from marketing, were flanking him, snickering. "Clara, isn't it?" he said, his voice smooth and condescending. He said my name like it was a foreign word he was trying out for the first time. I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. My worn-out blue overalls suddenly felt like a prison uniform. "We were just talking upstairs," he continued, gesturing vaguely towards the heavens of the executive suites, "about the upcoming annual gala. It's a very exclusive event, you know. A night to celebrate the Vance family." He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. "And we believe everyone is part of the Vance family, even the people who keep our floors shining." Mark and Trevor failed to stifle their laughter this time. A hot flush of shame crawled up my neck. I knew what this was. This was a joke, a cruel game for their own amusement. "So," Julian said, pulling a thick, cream-colored envelope from his jacket pocket. It had the gold Vance Industries crest embossed on it. He bent down slightly, not to meet my level, but as if examining an insect on the ground. He held the invitation out to me. "We'd be honored if you would be our guest." My hand trembled as I took it. The cardstock was heavy, expensive. My name was written on the front in elegant calligraphy. Miss Clara Evans. It felt like a forgery. I looked from the invitation back to his smug face. My mind was screaming at me to say no, to throw it back at him and tell him where he could shove his pity party. But then I thought of my mom. I thought of the stack of medical bills on our kitchen table, the ones that seemed to grow taller every week. I thought of the fact that this man's father signed my paychecks, the meager paychecks that were the only thing keeping us afloat. I couldn't afford to be proud. I couldn't afford to make an enemy of the prince. "Thank you, Mr. Vance," I managed to choke out. "Excellent," he boomed, his smile widening. "It's black tie, of course. I'm sure you have something suitable." His eyes flicked over my worn-out work clothes, and the insult was as sharp as a slap. He and his friends turned and walked away, their laughter echoing in the cavernous lobby long after they were gone. For 2 weeks, The invitation sat on my dresser, mocking me. I knew it was a trap. But a tiny, stupid part of me, a part I thought had died long ago, whispered, "What if? What if it wasn't a joke? What if it was a genuine, albeit clumsy, gesture?" The night of the gala, I stood in front of my cracked bedroom mirror. There was no money for a gown. Instead, I wore my mother's old dress from before she got sick. It was a simple, deep blue velvet dress from a time when she and my father used to go dancing. It was 20 years out of style, but it was clean and it fit. I'd spend an hour on my hair and makeup, trying to make myself look like I belonged somewhere other than behind a mop bucket. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a janitor. I saw a woman trying her best. It was enough. The ballroom was in a 5-star hotel downtown, a place I'd only ever cleaned. As I handed my threadbare coat to the attendant, I could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on me. The room was a sea of shimmering designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Diamonds glittered at throats and wrists. The air buzzed with quiet, confident chatter and the clinking of champagne glasses. I felt like a stray dog that had wandered into a pedigree dog show. Every head turned, every conversation lulled. The sense of being watched, of being judged, was suffocating. I took a deep breath, clutching my small, worn-out purse, and stepped onto the plush carpet. And that's when it happened. A single blindingly bright spotlight from a platform near the stage swiveled and locked directly onto me, pinning me in its glare. The entire ballroom, filled with the city's elite, fell into a dead, echoing silence. I was frozen, a deer in the headlights, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Then, Julian Vance's voice, amplified by a microphone, boomed across the silent room, dripping with malicious glee. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. Our guest of honor has finally arrived." Laughter started to bubble up from the crowd. It began as a low snicker from Julian's cronies, Mark and Trevor. Then it spread like a virus. Soon the entire opulent ballroom was filled with the sound of polite, cruel titters and outright guffaws. My cheeks burned as if I'd been slapped. The velvet of my mother's dress suddenly felt cheap and thin, a pathetic costume that couldn't hide the truth of who I was. I was a janitor, and this was my punishment for daring to step into their world. "Let's have a round of applause for Clara." Julian's voice boomed, dripping with fake sincerity. Every day, Clara works tirelessly in the shadows, making sure our Italian marble floors are spotless enough for us to see our own success reflected in them. She's an artist, really, wielding a mop like a paintbrush, a spray bottle like a spray bottle. More laughter. Sharp and pointed, each chuckle a tiny dart piercing my composure. My hands, calloused from years of scrubbing and wringing, were clenched so tightly at my sides, my knuckles were white. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. I wanted to turn and run, flee back to the anonymity of the empty late-night hallways, but the spotlight held me fast. My legs felt like they were cast in concrete. "We at Vance Industries believe in rewarding hard work," Julian continued, pacing the stage like a game show host. He was loving this. Every second of my public humiliation was fueling his ego. So tonight, while we celebrate a year of record profits and global expansion, we thought it was only right to honor the woman who truly keeps this company on its feet, or more accurately, on its floors. He snapped his fingers. From the side of the stage, Trevor wheeled out a small cart covered by a velvet cloth. My heart sank. This was it, the punchline. "Clara, come on up here." Julian beckoned with a grand, sweeping gesture. "Don't be shy. This is your night." The walk from the entrance to the stage felt like a mile. The sea of glittering people parted for me, their faces a blur of smirks and pitying glances. I could see the glow of cell phone screens as people recorded my walk of shame. I fixed my eyes on the stage, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. I focused on the memory of my mother's face when I'd tried on the dress. She had looked so proud. "You look like a princess, my Clara." That thought was the only thing holding me upright. When I finally reached the steps, Julian offered me a hand, his touch cold and clammy. I ignored it and pulled myself up. On stage, the heat from the lights was intense. I felt dizzy, exposed. "And now," Julian announced, turning to the cart. For her years of dedicated service, her unwavering commitment to cleanliness, and her truly sparkling personality, we present Clara Evans with the first ever Vance Industries Golden Mop Award. With a flourish, he whipped the cloth away. There it was, a brand new mop, but the kind I used every day, its metal parts spray-painted a cheap, tacky gold. A gaudy red bow was tied around the handle. The laughter in the room became a roaring wave of sound crashing over me. It was so loud it felt physical. Julian picked up the ridiculous prop and tried to hand it to me, his eyes gleaming with triumphant cruelty. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. This was it, the absolute bottom. He wanted me to take it. He wanted a picture of the poor janitor holding her golden mop, a photo that would undoubtedly make the rounds on social media, a permanent trophy of his vicious little game. I stared at the mop, then at his outstretched hand, and finally I lifted my head and looked directly into his eyes. And for the first time that night, I let him see the cold fury brewing beneath my fear. I wasn't going to take it. I opened my mouth to speak. To say what? I don't know. To curse him. To quit. To tell them all exactly what I thought of their rotten, soulless world. But before I could utter a single word, a voice cut through the din. It was not amplified by a microphone, yet it sliced through the laughter and commanded absolute instant silence. It was a voice accustomed to power, layered with ice and gravel. "Julian." Every head in the ballroom swiveled towards the back of the room. The spotlight operator, confused, swung the beam away from me and toward the source of the voice. There, standing by the main entrance, was a man I recognized from the portraits in the lobby. He was older, with a severe face, iron gray hair, and eyes that could freeze fire. He was supposed to be in Tokyo. It was Arthur Vance, the king himself, Julian's father. "What in God's name?" Arthur Vance said, his voice dangerously low as he began to walk slowly and deliberately toward the stage. "Do you think you are doing?" Julian's smug expression dissolved into a mask of pure panic. The blood drained from his face, leaving him pale and slack-jawed under the harsh stage lights. The golden mop suddenly seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds in his hand. He let it clatter to the floor. The silence in the ballroom was now absolute, thick with tension. You could have heard a diamond drop. Arthur Vance didn't run. He walked with a predator's calm, his expensive shoes making no sound on the plush carpet. His gaze was locked on his son, a laser beam of disappointment and cold fury. He didn't even glance at me, but I felt the immense gravity of his presence shift the entire atmosphere of the room. The sycophants who had been laughing moments before were now staring at their shoes, trying to melt into the wallpaper. He reached the stage and ascended the short steps in 2 fluid movements. He was shorter than Julian, but he seemed to tower over him. He stopped directly in front of his son, close enough that they were almost touching. I was on a video call with our Tokyo partners, Arthur said, his voice a low growl that was still somehow audible in every corner of the vast room. They were so impressed with the charity gala photos being posted online, they decided to tune into the live stream. He paused, letting the implication sink in. Imagine my surprise when I see my heir, the future of this company, behaving like a common bully in a schoolyard. He turned his head slightly and finally looked at me. His eyes weren't warm, but they weren't cruel either. They were assessing, sharp and intelligent. He took in my mother's old dress, my trembling hands, and the defiant glint in my tear-filled eyes. He gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod, as if acknowledging a strength he hadn't expected to find. Then he turned back to Julian. "You are an embarrassment, not just to me, but to the name Vance. You mistake cruelty for strength and arrogance for intelligence. You think this company is a toy, a stage for your pathetic games." He gestured dismissively at the gawking crowd. "You wanted to make a spectacle? Fine, you have one." Arthur Vance turned to face the audience. "This gala is over. My apologies to our guests whose evening was ruined by this display of pathetic immaturity." He then looked directly at Mark and Trevor, who looked like they were about to be physically ill. "And for those of you who found this so amusing, Human Resources will be contacting you on Monday. We're downsizing our department of court jesters." A collective gasp went through the crowd. He wasn't bluffing. Arthur's gaze landed back on me. "Miss Evans," he said, his tone formal but respectful, "I am profoundly sorry. No one who works for me deserves this kind of humiliation. This is not what Vance Industries stands for." He reached into his own jacket and pulled out a checkbook and a pen. In front of everyone, he scribbled furiously. He ripped the check out and held it out to me. "This is for the dress, your time, and the insult you were forced to endure tonight. It is, I assure you, not insignificant." I hesitated, looking from the check to his stern face. Taking it felt wrong, like accepting payment for being bullied. As if reading my mind, he said, "It's not charity, Miss Evans. It's damages. Something my son will be learning a great deal about." He turned back to a now quivering Julian. "You will go to Miss Evans's station tomorrow night. You will take her mop, the real one, and you will clean every floor in this building, from the lobby to the penthouse. You will do it for 1 month, without pay. Perhaps then you will learn the value of the work you so clearly despise." He didn't wait for a response. He turned and strode off the stage, disappearing through a side exit as staff began ushering the stunned, silent guests out of the ballroom. I was left on the stage with Julian. He wouldn't look at me. The prince had been dethroned in front of his entire kingdom. Without a word, I walked down the steps, past the golden mop lying on the floor like a discarded toy. I didn't take the check. My dignity wasn't for sale, not even for a price that would solve all my problems. Walking out of that ballroom, head held high, was payment enough. The next night, I came into work at my usual time. The building was quiet and calm, my familiar sanctuary. As I prepared my cart, I saw him, Julian Vance, dressed not in a designer suit, but in a plain gray jumpsuit. He stood awkwardly by the janitor's closet, his face a mixture of shame and resentment. He looked at me, and for the first time, there was no smirk, no condescension in his eyes, just nothing. He was a blank slate. "Show me what to do," he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper. I nodded, grabbing my bucket and mop. I didn't gloat. I didn't say, "I told you so." I simply handed him a pair of rubber gloves and a bottle of lemon-scented cleaner. "We start with the lobby," I said, "and don't miss the corners." As I watched the heir to the Vance fortune awkwardly dip a mop into a bucket of soapy water, I realized the scent of lemon cleaner no longer smelled like shame. It smelled like justice.